Hello and welcome to Spoilers, this first introduction to the play The Life and Death of Jack Straw. Following are some introductory notes and a plain text recording of the dialogue, a plain text being the first cut edit of our full cast audio recording. It has all the text, but no SFX, no Foley, and it's the edit we use to hunt out textual errors, retakes or cuts. So it's not perfect, and we may change the take and the text for the final thing. If you want to just enjoy our production, stop listening now and wait for the release. Or if you're listening in the future, look for the full cast episode further up the podcast list. Seriously, this is an exercise that some listeners won't enjoy. If it ain't for you, move on. But if you're still listening, let's enter Spoilerland. Hello and welcome to the spoilers for Jack Straw, Act 2, Scene 1. Yes, it's time for the moment you've all been waiting for. It's the scene with a goose. I'm going to spend a little too much time on this scene, but who cares? It's got a goose. Tom Miller, comedy clown, enters with a goose, ostensibly to deliver exposition. The goose is itself a visual demonstration of what is going on in the play. The rebels are in camp, and a camp needs feeding.
It is good to make provision, for peradventure we shall lack victuals, and we lie in camp on Blackheath long.
Blackheath long. They've been there a while. Now, there is a question as to how alive the goose is. It's still whole. There's a head and a body, and Tom possibly sits with the body of the goose behind him, the neck running under his arm, the head in front. I lay out this possible physical plan because it's important. There are other ways, obviously, to do this, but I see it this way for reasons I will now explain. Now, if the goose is alive, then there's no reason why Tom can't have a trick costume on, so that the goose's head and neck is a puppet that he operates. He'd have a sort of false arm behind that. And actually, this is how I would do it. So he's talking about eating the goose to the goose, as well as talking out to the audience. I mean, it would be a license to print money, and it makes the speech a little more engaging. But it could just be a dead goose. It could be lying behind him. But the idea of him talking to the goose, slightly wrestling, mock wrestling with this goose, talking about eating it and feeding all the men of the camp with it, is quite fun.
And in faith, as long as this goose lasts, we'll not starve. And as many good fellows as will come to the eating of her come. And welcome.
How generous Tom is. Anyone can have a bit of my goose. Oh, how he will rue that statement. Is this played again to the audience? ? Here, want a piece of my goose? It's not like he paid for it, because the goose is obviously looted.
For in faith, I came lightly by her, and lightly come, lightly gone.
And of course he can loot geese because he's a captain. And there's more power to come.
We captains are lords within ourselves. And if the world hold out, we shall be kings shortly.
And then there's a stage direction, which is what prompted my suggested play action with the goose being alive, with the body of the goose being behind Tom Miller. It's just as possible, even more likely, that the goose has just simply been left upstage, while Tom now walks downstage, or further down a thrust stage, to talk to the audience. Because, stage direction, enter Nobbs, and cut away the goose while he talketh, leave the head behind him, and exit. Tom Miller, as he says the last lines of this short speech, has the goose stolen from him by Nobbs. And that's funnier, in my opinion, if he's still holding the goose, the head and neck literally in his arms, and then he lifts up the head and finds there's nothing attached to the neck anymore because Nobbs has cut off the rest of the goose and run away with it. This is pure, he's behind you, panto action. and the speech he gives is probably broken up by pauses as he looks behind, as the audience makes noises, as various physical business is played out. This scene, in theory, barely a minute long, could last actually for quite a lot longer. Anyway, whilst comedy goose-stealing occurs, there is the rest of the speech, which is exposition, not unimportant exposition. Tom has been left behind to keep an eye on the camp, while the proper captains have gone to parley with the king at Greenwich, which is fine by him, as he has some eating to do.
The rest of my fellow captains are gone before to Greenwich to meet the king, that comes to know our minds. And while they be about it, I'll make good cheer with my goose here.
And he lifts up the head of the goose and...
What? Is the goose flown away without her head?
Tom Miller will be mightily put out about this goose. It will get a callback in just a moment. Act 2 is made up of 5 very, very short scenes that run into each other. In fact, you could almost think of it as 6 units of action. No, possibly even 7 short units of action with lots of comings and goings and alarums and excursions going on throughout. This scene I've looked at in isolation because of this fiddly bit of visual comedy, and ultimately the final cut in our full cast audio version will lose the goose joke. It's a visual gag. I've got a whole series of takes and extra dialogue that we've played around with, trying to get across what happens with the goose, but I think, hand on heart, it's doomed. This is something for the live stage, which is an issue we'll come to later. But we shall see. Tom runs off stage and will immediately return in the next scene, which seems a little odd. It's not impossible that this was the required action, runs off one door, quickly turns a corner, enters discreetly with the rest of the rebels. But it does hint at perhaps some missing action, or even a different order of event for Act 2. Because what's going to come up with the rest of the act is the abortive parley with the king, all of which is referred to after it didn't happen, and elements of that could be moved around. So I see no particular reason why, for example, the king's speech in 2 scenes' time couldn't be excised from the action and perhaps put in between here as a little bridge, or something else occurs, or some visual depiction of the meeting or the non-meeting of the king. But I don't think any of that is likely. More on this next time, as we're going to fly through the rest of Act 2. Lots of short scenes, lots of plot, but you pretty much met everyone now, so we can pick up the pace a bit. If you have any thoughts about my brief breakdown of the first scene of Act 2, or if you have any disagreements with my thoughts, or if I'm in plain error, let me know. I might re-edit based on your suggestions. Email us at admin@beyondshakespeare.org, or give us a buzz on Twitter @beyondshakes. Or you can support our work by becoming a patron. Patrons get a vote for the plays we work on next, and they also get most of the material first. Go to patreon.com/beyondshakespeare and get involved. But that's it from this relatively short spoiler episode. The full cast Super Deluxe edit will be coming anon. But till then, here is the plain text of Act 2, Scene 1, To the Life and Death of Jack Straw, performed by Hugh Weller-Poley as Tom Miller, and the goose played by Sir John Gielgud. And I've been your host, Robert Crighton. Enjoy.
It is good to make provision, for peradventure we shall lack victuals, and we lie in camp on Blackheath long. And in faith, as long as this goose lasts, we'll not starve. And as many good fellows as will come to the eating of her come, and welcome. For in faith, I came lightly by her, and lightly come, lightly gone. We captains are lords within ourselves, and if the world hold out, we shall be kings shortly. The rest of my fellow captains are gone before to Greenwich to meet the king, that comes to know our minds. And while they be about it, I'll make good cheer with my goose here. What? What? Is the goose flown away without her head?